Welcome again to 8 Good Minutes, and it's the show that we bring you a lot of relevant information that's not necessarily about the mortgage business, but around things that we find about our business that can be helpful in becoming successful. I am very lucky to be joined today by two young men, not that young, Mike Muller, Justin Rowe.
How you doing, DH?
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For those of you that know Muller personally, that's not the correct pronunciation of his last name, but it is the pronunciation of his last name here. And I think folks at home would just love to know how that came to be, that you decided that you would let folks in the office pronounce your last name differently than other folks do.
Years of just constant correcting. At this point, Mueller, it all works out the same way.
It's fine, yeah. Very flexible.
Give it up after the years.
So we could have talked about flexibility in this episode of the podcast, but instead we're going to talk about persistence and the power of persistence. And Allison just relayed a great story to me that when the folks came over to Mike and said, we're going to have you on the podcast talk about persistence, the whole team started laughing. Why is that?
That's pretty much everything about me.
Yeah.
Persistence always weighs out resistance.
Yeah.
It's everything I've lived by.
Yeah, tell me about that. Like, where does that come from with you? Is that just something that you learned as you started to get into sales, or were you always that way? Like, where's that for you?
Years of athletics, I've learned that.
Okay.
Always keep working no matter what. So just never stopping.
Yes.
So it's pretty much been inbred since I was younger.
Okay, got it. So persistence has been with you throughout. That's good. Mr. Rowe?
Yeah,
You're known as a little bit of a persistent guy, aren't you?
a little bit,
Yeah,
I guess.
yeah. Oh, you definitely are.
I'll take it.
Yeah. Tell us about it.
Very similar. As a young age, I was put into a lot of sports and different sports, right? So it was year round. It was, you're putting on your basketball shoes or you put on your soccer cleats. Like, there was always a different game, different rules, how you fit into all that. So I believe that kind of was a big part in my life, and being persistent. You had to show up, you had to be there, you had to be present, and you developed good skills practicing, and you knew what you were good at, but you also knew what you needed to work on and what you lacked. So again, sports was instrumental for me.
No, I think that's really interesting. And then, carrying over into business, I think that some people have the persistence bug and some don't. And I think where persistence can be construed as a negative versus a positive is sort of how you go about being persistent with people. And you probably see that every day in terms of the creativity that you maybe use, with clients to follow up or talk to them about things that you may need from them, and then you internally with people. So just talk about how you guys sort of approach being persistent so it's not a negative, but rather a positive, because there's a fine line there.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, calling somebody 5 times in a row, probably not the best form of persistence. Being creative, sending a text, sending an email, still being persistent, but a little bit different ways it's an art. And once you get good at it, it's everything to this business.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, and internally, kind of, how our business is set up, it's a lot of checks and balances. So, I knock on him and see things that he might not see. So, there's a reason why we're not all created the same, right? So, I think it's big that we can kind of bounce ideas, and we're always solution focused. And
yeah, and I'd imagine that you've been persistent with him before about a few things, right?
Yeah, just a few.
So for those at home, Justin sort of checks out everybody's work here to make sure that it's where it's supposed to be. And when you need something more, a document or some information or whatever, sometimes you got to stay on these guys.
That's right.
Keeps us honest.
Yeah. So what is your method? Text, calls, email, drop by? Because there's a lot of ways to do it.
It's a combination of drop-bys and emails. Some of them are shorter, some of them are longer. You gotta keep it different, I think, for these guys.
Okay, I like that. Yeah. And then so in terms of persistence with your leaders, whether it be maybe a sports coach or whoever it was early on or today, tell me about, sort of the good influences you've had with folks as it relates to persistence.
In terms of coaches, it's always, being persistent.
Third grade baseball, fifth grade hockey. Do you remember one in particular?
Yeah, absolutely. My 5th grade hockey coach,
Okay.
or my 6th grade especially, just was pretty much instilled that, and really that's when it kind of became, I understood it. He every single day he brought it in. So after that, he really just started honing in that, not just on the sport athlete, but at home too. And it's really, really just kind of really drilled that in.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
good.
For me, I don't think there was one particular coach, but it just looking back on how life kind of panned out now, and you had coaches that were more professional, maybe were getting paid to do it, and then you also had coaches that volunteered. So each one of those people were persistent in just teaching us the game, teaching us the rules. So just in general, the people that would step up and do the extra work and the things that aren't easy, which is teaching, was great.
Yeah. And I think that people in the world that I know that are like persistent with me, whether it be in the office or out of the office or whatever, there's a level of respect that you have for them knowing that they got to do that to get the job done. It's like when people never follow up with you on stuff, there's like, it's almost like not good, even though sometimes people don't like people that are being persistent. I'll tell you, somebody who's very, very persistent in a positive way was one of my coaches growing up, and just always on me about, making sure that we're doing things the way we're supposed to do them and sort of doing it over and over and over again. And it didn't bother me. I don't know why it didn't bother me, but it instilled in me sort of a work ethic and sort of a way of going about things where you didn't think of persistence as a bad thing. You thought of it as a good thing, which is kind of how you guys are as well. Who's the most persistent person in this office?
I think it depends on the topic.
Yeah.
I would probably say Henry.
Henry?
Henry's
Yeah.
real silent about it, but he's extremely persistent.
I mean, Shannon Barquette. and
Shannon
Noah,
Barquette?
for sure.
Shout out. Henry Doe and Shannon Barquette. Thanks for being on the show this week, guys.
Thanks,
I appreciate having us.
And that's another episode. How did we do on time, Benny? You got 20 seconds. That's under the wire. 10 seconds under the wire. Thanks for joining us on 8 Good Minutes. We'll see you next week.